Welcome, dear listener, to the Sleeping Hourglass. In this episode, we return to a world before Rome was an empire, when it was only a fragile idea breathing beside a restless river. Among reeds and moonlit echoes, we meet a man who did not conquer, but stood still, and in doing so, changed everything. If this quiet space brings you comfort, you're always welcome to linger or return another night. Before the world learned the name of Rome as a conqueror, it was still learning how to breathe. The Tiber flowed the same then, patient, brown, eternal, threading between 7 low hills scattered with huts and smoke. The sound of hammers on stone echoed through the valley, mingling with the cries of merchants, priests, and soldiers who did not yet know they were building something destined for forever. And over it all, there was once a king, Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud, the last monarch of a restless people who had grown weary of bowing. He ruled not as a shepherd, but as a shadow, building his throne from fear, from silence, from the weight of his own reflection. To him, the city was not a home, but a mirror of his will. He raised great temples and walls that shone in the sun like arrogance made stone. The people, once proud themselves, grew small beneath him. He inherited a Rome already shaped by kings, Romulus with his fire, Numa with his rituals, Tullus with his wars, and turned their legacy into tyranny. He built the temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill, as if to claim the favor of gods whose eyes had already begun to look away. He made slaves of citizens and citizens of the frightened. He silenced the Senate with gold and blade alike. Each dawn, the city woke to the sound of commands rather than prayers. But beneath that silence, something stirred. It began, as many revolutions do, not with swords, but with shame. The tale of Lucretia, noble, pure, wronged, spread like fire through the houses of men. A woman's cry became a nation's breaking point. Her death was a mirror held up to the city, showing them what their obedience had cost. In her stillness, the people saw their own chains, so Brutus, once friend to the king, raised the voice of rebellion, not a roar, not yet, but a quiet resolve, deep and unyielding as the Tiber itself. He called for Rome to remember itself, to choose not a man, but an idea. And on a morning that would echo through millennia, the people of Rome gathered. The sunlight fell across their faces like judgment and promise all at once. Tarquin fled, his crown abandoned, his power evaporating like mist on stone. No army stood between him and exile, only the weight of his own hubris. The king was gone, but in the hush that followed, Rome stood trembling. The city that had always obeyed did not yet know how to speak. The streets were quiet, even the birds seemed to listen for something new, the sound of freedom finding its first fragile words. In that silence, the Republic was born. It did not come with trumpets or glory. It came like a sunrise seen through fog, uncertain, trembling, but unstoppable. 2 consuls would rule instead of 1 king, each a balance against the other. Laws would be written, debated, broken, rewritten. Power would shift not through bloodline, but through persuasion. The people, those who had long bent their backs, would stand, even if they did not yet know how to remain upright. Yet freedom, as the Romans soon discovered, carries its own kind of fear. Without a king to blame, each decision became their own reflection. The Senate argued, the plebeians muttered. The generals eyed one another's ambitions. The absence of tyranny revealed how difficult it was to live without someone to command. Some whispered that perhaps a crown was easier than choice. But in the midst of this uncertainty, there was also wonder. Children grew up hearing that no man was born to rule another. Men who had once bowed now raised their voices in assembly. Women lit lamps to new gods, not of kingship, but of justice, of liberty, of dawn. In every home, the story of Tarquin's fall became a kind of lullaby, told not with hate but with warning. Still, beyond Rome's hills, the world watched. Kings do not sleep easily when another throne has fallen. To the north, the Etruscans murmured. To the south, the Latins and Sabines took note. What was this republic that dared to defy the natural order? A city ruled not by lineage, but by law. A city whose people believed that loyalty could be given to an idea rather than a man. Rome had traded a crown for a question. And though they could not yet see it, this question would define them, would drive them through centuries of conquest, civil war, and empire. It would be asked again and again, in marble halls and on battlefields alike. What is Rome, if not its people? The Tiber carried the question downstream, whispering through its reeds as it passed the city's edge. Fishermen, listening to its murmur, claimed the river spoke with the voice of the gods. Others said it was only the wind. But some, those who had seen tyranny fall, believed the river remembered. That it held the sound of chains breaking, of hearts unlearning obedience. At dusk, when the sun dipped behind the hills, the streets filled with a light neither royal nor divine. The glow of oil lamps flickering in doorways, each one a promise, never again. Yet even as the Republic took its first breath, it was fragile, like a child born amid storm. Tarquin had fled, but he had not fallen silent. In exile he brooded, whispering to the northern kings who feared Rome's example. Among them was Lars Porsena of Clusium, a ruler proud and ambitious, whose gaze turned southward toward the Tiber. And in that gaze, Rome's next trial began to take shape. The kings had fallen, yes. But power does not vanish when thrones are broken. It merely waits restless in the hearts of men. As the Tiber carried away the memory of kings, new footsteps gathered along its banks, foreign, heavy, filled with purpose. Beyond the hills, another crown was watching, and Rome's freedom had only just begun to be tested. The Republic was young, and the world was waiting to see if it would survive the dawn. Morning breaks softly over the 7 hills. The mist lingers low, curling through alleyways, and over the rooftops of a city still learning to breathe without a crown. The air feels different now, not lighter, but uncertain, as though Rome itself is aware of its newfound heart. The kings are gone, but their shadows remain, carved into marble, pressed into memory. In their place, 2 men stand where once only one ruled, Brutus and Collatinus, the first consuls of the Republic, face the dawn with heavy eyes. They have traded tyranny for trust, but trust, they learn, is fragile as clay before the fire. The Republic is a word still wet with meaning. The Senate stirs again, its chambers echoing with voices long kept silent. Men speak not as servants, but as citizens. Yet their words stumble, colliding like children learning how to walk. Law replaces decree, consent replaces fear. Still, the old habits linger. Deference comes easily, doubt more easily still. Freedom, it turns out, is a skill. The forum becomes the city's heart, pulsing with debate and dust. There, between stone columns and market cries, Rome tries to define itself. Merchants argue over grain, soldiers boast of loyalty, senators lift their robes and words with equal pride. The people listen, squinting through the glare of a new idea. that power can belong to everyone, and thus to no one alone. And yet, beneath that promise, there runs an undercurrent of unease. Not all voices are heard. The patricians, old families of wealth and rank, claim that wisdom, like land, must be inherited. The plebeians, who till the fields and bear the spears, begin to murmur that freedom divided is not freedom at all. The Republic's breath catches in its throat, as if fearing the sound of its own truth. Still, hope endures. It flickers in the streets like the oil lamps lit at dusk, small, wavering lights, fragile but stubborn. Rome begins to build again, temples, forums, aqueducts. The Tiber glimmers beneath the bridges, bearing the scent of clay and smoke. Children run through the hills, their laughter rising with the scent of laurel and wine. For the first time, their future seems open, not dictated by a king's decree, but written in the uncertain language of choice. Yet beyond those hills, the world waits, ancient, patient, and watchful. The Etruscans to the north do not sleep easily. Lars Porsena of Clusium listens to the whispers of a fallen monarch, Tarquin the Proud, the exiled king, nursing his wound of pride. In the night, they speak together by firelight, of revenge, of restoration, of Rome's audacity. A city without a king, Tarquin sneers, is a body without a head. And so the drums of war begin to beat once more. Back in Rome, the sound is faint at first, a rumour more than a warning. The Senate gathers beneath the vaulted ceiling of the Curia, their faces drawn in the flicker of torches. Messengers arrive with tidings. Porsena is marching south. His banners bear the tusked emblems of Clusium, and his soldiers move like a tide of bronze. Fear returns to the city like an old acquaintance. Women pray at their hearths. Men sharpen blades that have not yet rusted from the last rebellion. Brutus, ever steady, reminds them that freedom must be defended not with pride, but with unity. Still, some tremble, for what is the worth of liberty if it lasts only a single season? Outside the city walls, the fields lie silent. The olive trees bow in the wind as though eavesdropping on the fate of men. Farmers bury their ploughs and take up spears, leaving furrows half sown, trusting the earth to wait. The Tiber murmurs, its waters darker now, reflecting both fear and determination. In the stillness before battle, Rome listens. It listens to the wind across the plain, to the faint clash of distant arms, to the heartbeat of its own fragile dream. There is a sense, faint but growing, that the Republic's true test has not yet begun. For freedom is not proved in peace, but in the moments when peace is threatened. And so the people gather by the river. The consuls stand before them, their words slow and solemn. Rome has no king, they declare, and so each man must be his own. The crowd murmurs, unsure if this is courage or folly. The young men, restless with purpose, march toward the Tiber, toward the bridge that links them to their fate. The Sublician Bridge, old, wooden, simple. To most, it is only a path across water, but soon it will become something else. A symbol, a threshold, a heartbeat in wood and rope. Beneath it, the Tiber swirls, ancient and aware, waiting to bear witness once more. As evening falls, the last rays of sun catch on the rooftops of Rome. The city glows briefly, like gold before nightfall. Children are gathered indoors. Prayers rise in whispers. The sky turns the colour of embers. Somewhere beyond the hills, the march of Porsena's soldiers echoes closer. A slow thunder that will soon reach the river's edge. The Republic, still so young, stands on the verge of its first trial. Its freedom, barely learned, must now be defended. the people of Rome, who only just began to speak, will soon learn what it means to fight, not for conquest, but for the right to remain their own. And in the shadows of the bridge, among the murmuring reeds, one soldier watches the horizon. His armor gleams faintly in the dusk. His name, not yet legend, will soon be whispered by the river and remembered for ages. The night deepens over Rome as the sound of approaching war ripples through the valley. The young republic holds its breath, and the river listens, for beyond the misted hills a new name is forming on the wind: Porsena. And with him, the test of courage draws near. The northern hills rise dark and silent against the morning sky, their ridges veined with mist and oak. Beyond them lies Clusium, the Etruscan city of kings, where stone walls gleam like bronze beneath the sun. There, amid the smoke of sacrifice and the clang of arms, sits Lars Porsena, ruler of a world older than Rome, a man who dreams in the language of dominion. Porsena is not a man content to watch from afar. He is born of a people who taught the Romans their first crafts. The curve of an arch, the sweep of a plough, the solemn rites that bind the living to the gods. Yet he looks south and sees a student grown unruly. Rome, once a small, dutiful ally, has cast off its master's ways. It dares to name itself free. To him, this is not courage, it is contagion. The exiled King Tarquin sits before him, proud even in disgrace. His eyes burn with the fever of the dispossessed. He speaks of treachery, of betrayal, of the city stolen from him by mobs who mistook vengeance for virtue. His voice drips with honey and venom alike, painting Rome as a faithless child in need of correction. Porsena listens. The flicker of the brazier dances across his armor, tracing the shape of his resolve. He does not need Tarquin's plea to move him, only his excuse. For within the heart of every king lies the same old fear that freedom once witnessed cannot be contained. If Rome's rebellion succeeds, what other city might rise to follow? The counsel is brief, the decision inevitable. The banners of Clusium unfurl like the breath of a storm. Messengers ride out through the northern valleys, carrying the call to arms. Spears are lifted from racks, shields polished, war chariots readied. The Etruscan host begins its march southward, each footfall an echo of intent. In the markets of Rome, rumors travel faster than wind. The name Porsena reaches the ears of the people before the dust of his army touches their borders. Mothers hush their children, merchants whisper of legions that darken the horizon. The Republic, still tender in its infancy, feels the chill of a gathering shadow, but beyond fear there is something else, a strange, defiant calm. In the Senate, men debate not whether to fight, but how to endure. They have no king to command them now, only a promise that Rome belongs to its people. And promises once spoken are not easily broken. Brutus, his voice steady as stone, reminds them that tyranny once fell beneath their courage. It can fall again. Meanwhile, the Tiber waits. It glides beneath the bridges, whispering of the days when the river bore only fishermen and ferries, not armies. The water carries the reflection of a city poised between destiny and ruin. The reeds along its banks rustle with secrets, as if the river itself remembers the cost of freedom. In Clusium, Porsena's army moves like a living creature, a serpent of bronze and leather winding down the Apennine slopes. The sound of its passage fills the valleys. Hooves against earth, chariot wheels cutting grooves into stone. Villages along the way fall silent, their inhabitants peering from doorways as the tide of war passes south. Some cheer. Others cross themselves and pray. All understand that the balance of the world is shifting. Tarquin rides among them, a ghost chasing his throne. He imagines the capital shining again with his name, the people bowing once more. Yet even in his heart, a flicker of doubt remains. For Rome, the city he left behind, is not the same one he ruled. He seeks to reclaim a crown that no longer fits the world. By the time the Etruscans reach the Tiber Valley, spring has turned the land gold. The river glimmers beneath a sky washed clean by wind, its current swift and deep. Across the water, Rome stands, small, defiant, walls newly raised, hearts newly formed. The young republic watches from her hills, her people holding their breath. The armies meet not yet in battle, but in silence. From his vantage, Porsena surveys the land. He sees a city of farmers and artisans, not the vast empire that history will one day name, and wonders how such simplicity could provoke such defiance. Perhaps that is what unsettles him most, that Rome's strength lies not in her size, but in her will. He sends envoys to demand surrender. Rome's reply is brief and final. No king shall ever rule here again. It is a sentence made of few words, yet heavy enough to shift the course of centuries. The messengers return to Porsena, and his laughter cuts through the air like iron drawn from a forge. So be it, he thinks. Then they will learn the price of stubbornness. That night, fires bloom across the hills, hundreds of them, each a heartbeat of war. The flames glow red against the river's surface, reflected like omens. In Rome, men keep watch upon the walls, women pray at their doorways. The city's breath moves in unison, slow and deliberate. Somewhere within that stillness, beneath the shadow of the Palatine Hill, a young soldier sharpens his blade. His armor bears no crest, no mark of nobility, yet his eyes are steady, his heart unshaken. His name is Horatius, though for now he is simply one among many, a face in the crowd, a life among thousands. He listens to the distant murmur of the enemy camps, and to the soft voice of the Tiber beyond. The river hums its endless song, of courage, of sacrifice, of men who stand when all others flee. Horatius closes his eyes and lets its rhythm steady his breath. Tomorrow, perhaps, the storm will break. But tonight, the city holds its quiet vigil, the last peace before the flood. Across the river, the Etruscan fires shimmer like constellations fallen to earth. Rome watches, waiting, her fate balanced upon the wooden planks of a single bridge. And in that stillness, one man begins to hear the faint whisper of destiny calling his name. The morning breaks not in peace, but in the sound of iron. The light over the Tiber is pale, hesitant, as if the sun itself fears to see what waits upon the bridge. Beneath its trembling shimmer, 3 men stand shoulder to shoulder: Horatius Cocles, Spurius Lartius, Titus Herminius. Names that will one day be spoken with reverence, but now belong only to soldiers watching the tide of war approach. Behind them, the city is alive with frantic movement. Citizens shout, hammers strike, ropes snap as men work to dismantle the bridge plank by plank. The air is filled with dust, the tang of sweat, the acrid bite of smoke. Rome, small, unfortified newborn, trembles in its infancy. The Republic, barely out of its cradle, faces its first reckoning. The enemy comes in waves, a blur of bronze and crimson, of spears catching light like a field of fire. The banners of Clusium rise above them, snapping in the cold wind. Lars Porsena's army moves with terrible order, the weight of empire behind it. Among them rides Tarquin, the fallen king. his face pale with the fury of a man who has lost not just a throne, but a world. Horatius watches them come, his eyes narrow but calm. He is no god, nor demigod, he is flesh and fear and faith interwoven. His armor is scuffed, his shield dented. A soldier's shield, not a hero's. Yet in the stillness before battle, he feels something ancient stirring, something that belongs less to victory than to duty. Behind him lie his people, his river, his home. Before him, the flood, a horn sounds, the echo rolls across the water like thunder over hollow hills. And then, silence. For a heartbeat, even the birds seem to hold their breath. The Tiber murmurs softly below, the whisper of eternity beneath the roar of a single day. Then the first arrow flies. It hisses through the air, glancing off Horatius's shield with a metallic scream. Another follows, and another. The three men crouch, shields raised, the wooden planks beneath their feet trembling. The bridge groans under their weight, not yet broken, but weary. "Hold," Horatius says quietly, his voice cutting through the din like a clear bell. "Hold the bridge." He does not shout. He does not command. He asks. And in that quiet command lies the weight of Rome's soul. The enemy charges. The earth seems to move beneath the pounding of feet. Arrows rain, spears flash, and the first clash of bronze on bronze erupts like the breaking of a storm. The bridge becomes a living thing, a narrow world between two fates. Spurius fights like a craftsman, each strike measured and sure. Titus, fierce and younger, moves with the fire of untested valor. Horatius anchors them, the still point in the center of the storm. His sword rises and falls, his breath steady, his heart beating with the rhythm of the river below. The Etruscans press forward, rank after rank. They shout the name of their king, of vengeance, of empire. Yet each time they surge, the line of three does not yield. The clash becomes rhythm, the rhythm becomes prayer. The bridge is their altar, the Tiber their witness. Behind them, the Romans shout to one another, "Faster! Break the bridge!" But the timbers resist, stubborn as the city itself. The workers know that if the bridge falls too soon, their defenders will be lost. Too late, and the enemy will cross. It is a cruel balance, like holding one's breath between life and loss. A spear strikes Titus in the shoulder. He staggers, blood darkening his tunic. Horatius turns, shielding him with his body, deflecting another blow. The metal screeches. His arm shakes from the impact. "Go back if you must," Horatius murmurs without looking. But Titus only grins through the pain. Not yet. They fight on. The sunlight catches on their helmets, turning sweat into gold. The bridge groans again. Beneath their feet, the river churns, carrying splinters of wood and drifting leaves away. Horatius feels time stretch and blur. He cannot tell if minutes or hours pass. He moves by instinct now, block, strike, step, breathe. Every movement is a decision, every heartbeat a vow renewed. The Etruscans begin to falter, not from fear, but from confusion. How can three men hold against so many? How can mortals stand against inevitability? Because Rome, still fragile, still undefined, is behind them, and to fall would be to let the dream die before it has even learned to breathe. A lull. Smoke drifts. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, blood, and burning pine. Then a cry from the rear. The bridge is nearly down. The words ripple through the soldiers like lightning. Horatius glances back. The workers are nearly done. Only a few planks remain between survival and ruin. He knows what must come next. But first, one more surge. Lars Porsena himself advances to the front, regal, furious, eyes burning beneath his helmet. His soldiers part before him like water around a stone. He points his sword at Horatius. "Yield," he calls, his voice like iron. "Yield, and your city may yet live." Horatius does not answer. He raises his shield, the old Roman crest gleaming faintly beneath the grime. "Then Rome shall live," though Horatius falls. The two forces meet again, and the bridge shudders as if the Tiber itself protests the weight of courage. Spurious armor is cracked. Titus can barely lift his arm. Yet they fight, not for glory, but for breath, for one more heartbeat of Rome's freedom. And then, as if the gods themselves decide the moment, the cry comes again. "No, break it now." The workers pull, the ropes snap, the bridge moans. Horatius feels it in his bones. The slow give of ancient timber, the sigh of surrender in the wood. He knows they have seconds. He turns to his comrades, voice low but unwavering. "Go, back to the city." That is an order. Spurius hesitates. "We'll hold together." "No." Horatius looks at them, his eyes calm as the river beneath. Rome must have someone left to remember. The words settle like ash in the air. The others understand. With one last glance, they retreat, step by step, backward, never turning their backs until the final plank beneath them begins to crumble. And so, the three become two, and the two vanish into the city's shadow. Horatius stands alone. The enemy hesitates, almost awed. He stands like a statue carved of defiance, framed by smoke and sun. Behind him, the last boards of the bridge creak and sag. Ahead, the army gathers, unsure whether to strike or to stare. He breathes, one long, steady breath. He can taste the river's damp breath rising through the gaps in the planks. "Come, then," he whispers. "Come, and see how one Roman dies." The words are not shouted, they are offered, quietly, as one might offer prayer. The Etruscans charge again, but the bridge groans beneath their weight, threatening to give way. Arrows rain once more. One pierces Horatius's thigh, another glances off his helmet. Blood runs, slow and warm, down his leg. Still he stands, shield raised, sword bright. Behind him, the final ropes snap. The sound is deep, not a crack, but a sigh, as if the Tiber itself breathes out. The bridge begins to break. The planks tremble beneath Horatius' feet, and the river below opens its arms. Behind him, the city waits, silent, watching. Ahead, the enemy surges once more. In the instant between standing and falling, courage becomes stillness. The bridge is gone. The last cry of splintering wood fades into the roar of the Tiber. The world narrows to one figure standing upon the few remaining planks, his outline wreathed in smoke and sunlight. Behind him, the city holds its breath, the small, defiant heart of a republic newly born. Before him, the tide of enemies gathers once more. Horatius Cocles, the man of a single eye, the soldier whose courage has outlasted the bridge, stands alone. His shield is dented, his tunic torn, his face streaked with blood and dust. Around him, the air quivers with the echoes of battle, yet within him, there is only stillness. That quiet, unshaken core where faith leaves when everything else breaks. The Etruscans stare across the ruined span, unsure whether they behold a man or a legend rising before their eyes. Their banners flicker in the wind like tongues of flame. The river glimmers beneath them, wide and restless, carrying fragments of broken wood toward the sea. No one moves. In that strange pause, time itself seems to hesitate. The cries of the wounded fade. The clangor of arms recedes, and the Tiber murmurs softly, an ancient sound eternal and patient. Then Lars Porsena raises his sword. The moment shatters. The tide surges forward. They come in a thunder of feet and steel, their shouts rolling across the water like a storm breaking upon the land. Arrows darken the air. Spears flash. The bridge trembles under their weight. Yet Horatius does not yield. He lifts his shield, braces his feet, and meets the first blow with a sound like lightning striking iron. The shock runs through his arm, but he does not falter. He answers with his sword, a clean, sure stroke that cuts through the noise, a note of defiance ringing above the chaos. The battle narrows to a rhythm: breath, strike, shield, step. His body remembers what his mind no longer has time to think. The world becomes the arc of a blade, the rush of air, the taste of iron on his tongue. Each heartbeat is an oath renewed. I will hold. The Etruscans press harder, their numbers overwhelming. Yet they cannot pass. Horatius moves with the patience of stone and the fire of devotion. He parries, pivots, thrusts, every motion deliberate, as though he dances to an invisible rhythm only he can hear. The river watches, glittering beneath the wreckage. The current swells around the fallen timbers, carrying away splinters that once formed the bridge of Rome. It seems to murmur words the living cannot hear. Words of memory, of witness, of things yet to come. Arrows glance off Horatius's shield. One finds his thigh, another grazes his shoulder. He grits his teeth and presses on. Pain is an old companion. It reminds him that he is still here, still standing. He steps forward again, forcing the nearest enemy back. The soldier stumbles, fear flickering in his eyes. For in Horatius' gaze, there is something vast and wordless, the strength of a man who has already accepted death, and therefore cannot be conquered. The battle stretches like an eternity compressed into a heartbeat. Dust rises, curling into sunlight. The Etruscans shout his name, not in triumph, but in awe. Each man who faces him feels, for an instant, the weight of the city behind that single shield. The breath of mothers, the cries of children, the prayers whispered in the dark. Rome itself seems to fight through him. Behind the enemy ranks, Lars Porsena watches, silent. He sees the planks falling, the water rising, the single soldier holding against the tide. In his heart, perhaps, a strange respect stirs, the recognition that some battles are not measured by victory, but by the endurance of spirit. Horatius' strength begins to fade. His arm grows heavy, his breath shallow. Sweat burns his eyes. Yet something deeper keeps him upright. Not pride, not fury, but devotion. Rome is not yet great. It has no empire, no marble temples, no poets to immortalize this day. It has only him. And that, he thinks, is enough. The next blow drives him to one knee. He catches himself, rising again with a snarl that is half prayer, half defiance. The sun dips lower, setting the river aflame with gold. The bridge beneath him creaks, the last fragments begin to break apart. He glances once toward the far shore. There, across the widening gap, he can see the faces of his comrades. Spurius, Titus, the workers, the citizens, all frozen in the stillness of awe. He cannot hear their voices over the roar, but he knows what they are shouting. Jump, Horatius, the bridge is gone. Save yourself. He hears it in the wind, in the pulse of the river, the call of life pulling against the weight of destiny. For a moment he hesitates. His heart, steady until now, stumbles. He thinks of his father's house, of the fields beyond the walls, of the peace he might never see again. He thinks of Rome's children, whose laughter will fill the streets long after his bones are dust. Then he lowers his sword. The Etruscans pause uncertain. Is he surrendering? Is he finished? No. He is listening to the river. The Tiber's voice rises, soft and insistent. It is not the voice of death, but of return. It speaks of homecoming, of the eternal flow between sacrifice and salvation. Horatius looks once more toward Rome. The sun glows behind the city's silhouette, bathing the roofs and walls in amber light. The air smells of ash, of pine, of life reborn through struggle. He takes a single step backward. The bridge moans beneath him. Another plank gives way, crashing into the river below. He knows that if he remains a moment longer, the tide will take him, yet he does not fear it. The current that once threatened now seems to beckon. The same river that witnessed Rome's birth now offers to bear its savior home. He raises his sword one final time. The light catches it, gleaming like fire against the dusk. For Rome, he calls, not loudly, not as a boast, but as a whisper carried by wind and water alike. Then, with the last strength left in him, he strikes down one final foe, turns toward the river, and leaps. For a breathless instant, he is suspended between sky and water, between life and legend. The world falls silent, no cries, no thunder, only the endless hush of time itself. Then he vanishes into the Tiber. The Tiber receives him whole, cold and crushing. Its current seizes his body, pulling him into its slow, swirling heart. His armor drags at him, heavy as stone, pressing him downward. His fingers reach for the light above, pale, wavering, already distant. The clang of battle fades, replaced by the muffled roar of the current. He is falling through memory now, through the layers of Rome's past and the shape of its future. The water fills his ears with the sound of everything. The cries of the builders who raised the bridge, the prayers of the mothers waiting beyond the walls, the heartbeat of a city still learning to survive. The river knows them all. It has carried their hopes and their dead alike, season after season, from the hills to the sea. He drifts deeper. The current grows gentle, rocking him as though reluctant to let go. Beneath the weight of his armor, he feels his body begin to slow to surrender. His chest tightens, the edges of the world blur. Yet even here, beneath the murk and chill, there is peace. For in this suspended moment between life and legend, he feels the truth of what he has done. The bridge is gone, the enemy halted. The city, his city, stands. Rome leaves. Above the surface, the battle is over. Smoke trails across the riverbank like the ghosts of burned timbers. The Etruscans stand in silence, their spears lowered, watching the water claim the man who denied them victory. They are conquerors without a conquest, witnesses to something they do not understand. Lars Porsena, the king who came to humble Rome, lowers his sword. His face, carved in disbelief, softens. Perhaps in that quiet, even he feels the weight of what has passed. That sometimes a single act of courage can make an army tremble more than any blade. On the far bank, the Romans surge to the edge of the water. The air fills with voices, calling his name, straining to see him among the foam. Some fall to their knees, others weep. The bridge burns behind them, collapsing in bursts of ember and ash, and still the Tiber keeps its secret. Beneath the surface, time loosens its hold. Horatius drifts through shadows flecked with gold. The sun's light filters down in trembling threads, brushing the edges of his faceplate. Around him, leaves and fragments of wood spiral like falling stars. His sword slips from his grasp, sinking into the depths. He watches it fade until it becomes one with the riverbed. Another offering to time. He remembers the fields beyond the city, where he once walked as a boy, barefoot in the dust. He remembers laughter echoing between the hills, the smell of wet earth after rain. He remembers his mother's voice, quiet and steady, telling him that courage was not found in the shout of a crowd, but in the stillness of a choice made alone. Perhaps that is why he stayed upon the bridge. Not to be remembered, not to be immortal, but because he could not do otherwise. Some hearts are built to hold the line. He closes his eyes. Then, a sudden tug. Something in the current shifts. The weight of his armor lifts, caught by a swell of water that turns him gently toward the light. The Tiber, which moments ago sought to bury him, now bears him upward. He floats, motionless, carried by the deep rhythm of the flow. Above him, the light widens, a pale disk trembling in the dark. His chest tightens, lungs burning. One last effort. He kicks, once, twice, his body aching. Then the surface breaks open. Air floods his mouth. He gasps, choking, coughing river water and smoke. The sky blazes gold and crimson, the last light of day caught in the rippling waves. Behind him, the ruins of the bridge still burn, their glow reflected upon the water like a second sun. He floats, barely conscious, carried downstream by the current. His shield drifts beside him, its bronze surface cracked but unbroken. From the far shore, a cry rises. Faint at first, then clearer. Horatius. Horatius. Figures rush along the bank, waving, shouting. He cannot answer. His lips part, but only a whisper escapes, a sound that the river takes for its own. The current draws him toward the reeds, where hands reach out to pull him in. Rough voices call his name again and again, trembling with disbelief. When at last they drag him from the water, his eyes are half closed, his breath shallow, his body trembling with exhaustion. Yet when he looks toward the city beyond, a small smile touches his lips. He has returned home. That night, the fires burn low upon the riverbank. The citizens of Rome gather in silence, watching the water drift past. The same river that has taken so much, now returning what it borrowed. Somewhere among them lies Horatius, his wounds bound, his head resting upon his shield. He speaks little. The healers whisper that he should not have lived. Yet when he stirs, his first words are soft, almost dreamlike. The bridge is down. They nod. And Rome? Safe, someone says. A long silence follows. He closes his eyes again, as though the answer alone is enough to heal him. The Tiber murmurs beside them, carrying the last embers of the bridge downstream. Its surface gleams under the moon, calm now, indifferent and eternal. But within that calm lies memory, the echo of footsteps, the clang of steel, the quiet promise of a man who would not yield. The story will be told again and again. How Horatius stood at the bridge, how he faced an army, how he leapt into the river and lived. It will be sung in taverns, whispered in temples, carved into stone. Yet no telling will ever capture the silence that came after. That deep, endless stillness where courage dissolved into peace. Because the true victory was not in survival, but in surrender, the kind that turns a man into something more enduring than flesh. The river flows on. It will see empires rise and fall, bridges built and burned, kings crowned and forgotten. But somewhere, in the rhythm of its waves, the faint echo remains, the sound of a man falling not into death, but into memory. The Tiber sleeps beneath the moon, carrying both ashes and echoes downstream. Somewhere beyond its bends, Rome dreams of the man it nearly lost, and the courage that the water could not drown. The bridge has fallen, and Rome still stands. Morning light spills across the wounded city, revealing not ruin, but rebirth. Where fear once gathered, garlands now bloom. The people sing the name of a man who stood alone, though he feels, in truth, further from them than ever. For after the roar of battle fades, even a hero must learn to leave with silence, and to find within it the shape of peace. The city becomes a festival of gratitude. Flowers line the streets. Music spills from courtyards. The Senate decrees a feast to honor the defender of the bridge. Traders close their stalls, and even the stern patricians soften their steps as they pass beneath garlands strung across the forum. Horatius is carried upon a litter through the city's heart, though he would rather walk. The people will not allow it. They shower him with petals, with bread, with small offerings, tokens of love and disbelief. A mother lifts her child toward him, whispering, "Look, my son, this is Rome." Yet even as the crowd swells around him, Horatius feels apart, as though the river still flows between him and the world. Each cheer strikes him not as praise, but as an echo of something he no longer belongs to. For courage, he now understands, is not a moment's flame, but a wound that never fully closes. He looks upon his city, its narrow lanes, its walls still scarred from battle, and sees it as both fragile and eternal. These people, shouting his name, do not yet know what they owe him, and perhaps they never will. Their freedom, freshly born, is a trembling thing. He knows it must be guarded not only by swords, but by silence, restraint, and the willingness to stand alone again, if ever the day demands it. As the sun begins to sink, the feast begins upon the capital. Torches flare, wine flows, laughter trembles through the twilight. Senators rise to toast him, their words swelling with poetic gratitude. Horatius Cocles. They proclaim the savior of Rome, the guardian of the Republic, the bridge between fear and faith. Each title feels distant, hollow. Horatius smiles when expected, raises his cup and drinks. But his thoughts are elsewhere. He sees again the river's gleam, the broken planks drifting like ghosts. He wonders what the Tiber remembers now, and whether it, too, mourns the silence after heroism. When the feasting ends, when the songs fade, and the revelers stumble home beneath the stars, Horatius remains alone in the square. The fires die down. The city sleeps. He looks toward the dark ribbon of the Tiber below, still moving, still whispering. In that whisper, he hears it again, not applause, not prayer, but the quiet murmur of history turning its page. He removes the laurel crown and sets it upon the steps of the temple. It gleams faintly in the moonlight, a symbol of honor, yes, but also of weight. To be remembered is to never truly rest. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of the river. He closes his eyes and listens. Beneath the songs and the silence, beneath the stone and the stars, he feels something vast and tender moving through him. Not pride, not sorrow, but peace. The peace of one who has done enough. Days pass. The legend spreads beyond Rome's walls, carried by merchants, travelers, and storytellers. In distant villages, they speak of the man who stood alone on the bridge and lived. Some say he was touched by the gods. Others insist he was the god of the Tiber himself. The truth dissolves, as all truths do, into reverence. But within Rome, among those who saw him, the story remains human. They remember the tremor in his step, the pale exhaustion in his eyes. They remember how he refused the spoils of war, how he asked for nothing but rest. The Senate offers him land, wealth, and lifelong honor. He accepts only a single field by the river, a quiet place where reeds move in the wind like prayer. There, each evening, he sits by the water's edge. Sometimes he speaks to it softly, as though to an old friend. Sometimes he simply listens. The Tiber answers in its endless language, a voice that carries both memory and forgetting. Children come to visit him. They bring offerings of fruit, small drawings, the flowers their mothers once dropped into the water. He smiles at them, tells them nothing of war, but teaches them to listen, to hear the difference between a river's roar and its silence. Both, he says, are forms of courage. He grows older, though not old. The scars on his body fade into the skin. The ache of his shoulder becomes familiar, almost kind. When storms rise over the city, he feels the pulse of the bridge beneath his feet again. Not the wood, but the idea of it, the unseen crossing between fear and faith. He dreams often of that moment. The collapsing bridge, the plunge, the dark embrace of the river. But in his dreams, he does not fall. He simply floats, watching the lights of Rome above him, flickering like stars. One evening, years later, as the first shadows of dusk settle over the Tiber, he walks once more to the water's edge. The city hums behind him, changed, grown, alive. He feels no need to be remembered. Memory, he knows, belongs to the river now. He kneels, touching the cool surface, and whispers something that only the current can hear. The river carries it away, the last word of a man who asked nothing from history but the chance to serve it well. Above him, the moon rises. The wind moves softly through the reeds, and Rome, unknowing, sleeps within the cradle of its own legend. The city has learned to honor him with song, but Horatius honors the silence instead. For in the stillness after glory lies a deeper kind of triumph, one that whispers not of conquest, but of peace. Glory, like dawn, burns bright, but only for a moment before the light grows soft and unrecognizable. Weeks pass since the day Horatius returned from the Tiber's embrace. The garlands of the festival have wilted. The songs that once filled the forum fade into the rhythm of ordinary life. Rome, tireless in its living, moves forward as all cities do, grateful, yes, but restless. The bridge is being rebuilt plank by plank. Merchants once again cry their prices across the square. Children chase each other through the streets where the echoes of war had only recently lingered. And somewhere beyond the noise, at the edge of the Tiber, Horatius leaves in quiet. He tends a small patch of land given to him by decree of the Senate, a modest gift beside the great river he once defied. The field is not grand, it is a strip of earth where reeds sway and the soil smells of memory. Here, he finds a different kind of rhythm, the slow pulse of growing things, the hum of insects, the laughter of children who come to listen to the old hero's stories. But his stories are not what they expect. He does not speak of war or of blood, but of bridges and rivers, of how wood can hold faith as well as stone. He tells them that courage is not noise, that glory fades like smoke, but the quiet after courage that remains. Some nights, when the wind carries the city's distant murmur, he can almost hear them. The crowds chanting his name, the priests blessing him, the Senate proclaiming his deeds in marble words. Those memories come like ghosts, neither welcome nor unwelcome, simply part of the air he breathes. In the evenings, when the sun drifts low and gold spills across the river, Horatius sits by the water and watches it move. The Tiber, unchanged, flows onward as if indifferent to memory. It has seen kings fall, walls crumble, empires dream themselves into being. What is one man, even a hero, against such eternity? Sometimes he dips his hand into the current, feeling its cool weight slip between his fingers. It feels the same as it did that day, when he leapt from the bridge into its arms, half man, half legend. The difference now is peace. Then, the river carried him from war to life. Now, it carries his thoughts toward quietness. He thinks of his comrades, Spurius Lartius and Titus Herminius, who stood with him until the bridge broke. They visit sometimes, bearing food or news from the city. Together they sit in silence, the kind that needs no filling. They speak rarely of the past, for some memories are too full to name. When they do speak, it is of ordinary things. Of harvests, of weather, of how Rome grows. Their laughter is softer now, threaded with understanding. One night, after his friends depart, Horatius walks along the bank under the stars. The moon reflects upon the Tiber like a shield, round, luminous, unbroken. He stops and looks toward the rebuilt bridge in the distance. It is stronger now, made of new wood, new hands. And yet, as he gazes upon it, he feels the echo of the old bridge still there. Invisible, but alive in memory, spanning the space between fear and faith. That invisible bridge, he realizes, is what he truly defended. Not the planks or the city, but the unseen thing that binds people to courage. The idea that one soul can stand firm enough to change the tide. In the months that follow, Rome grows more complex. The Senate argues over laws and power. The people grow restless again, their voices sharper, their hopes hungrier. The Republic, still in its youth, learns that freedom carries its own weight, heavier, perhaps, than tyranny. Now and then, messengers arrive to seek his counsel. They ask him to speak before the Senate, to lend his name to some decree or cause. Each time, he refuses gently. The city no longer needs my words, he says, only its own. The messengers do not understand. They see humility as withdrawal, silence as distance. But Horatius knows what they do not, that glory once earned must be set down lest it turn to pride. A man cannot serve both history and peace. The field by the river becomes his world. He plants olive trees, their roots deep and patient. When their leaves shimmer in the light, he feels as though the river itself has given them breath. Children who once came for stories now come for guidance, asking him what it means to be brave. He tells them the truth that courage is not a roar, but a quiet choice, and that sometimes the greatest act of strength is to stop holding the sword. The seasons pass. The Tiber rises and falls, whispering secrets to the shore. Horatius's hair greys like the dust on old armor, and his eyes soften. He walks slower now, and his spirit remains steady, as if the same bridge still stands within him unbroken. One afternoon, as the sky glows with the color of bronze, a young soldier comes to him. Earnest, bright-eyed, trembling with reverence. "I've been sent," the young man says, "to ask for your blessing. We march north tomorrow. They say you are the measure of what Rome can be." Horatius smiles faintly. "I am only a man," he replies. "The river was stronger than I." The soldier shakes his head. "No, sir. The river carried you because you belong to Rome." Horatius places a hand upon the young man's shoulder. "Then carry Rome well," he says softly. "But remember, it is not the battle that makes a hero. It is the peace he leaves behind." The soldier departs. Horatius watches him go, feeling both pride and prayer rise within him like twin breaths of the same wind. When the night falls, he returns to the water's edge. The moonlight folds around him, the reeds sway like a slow heartbeat. He thinks of the bridge once more, not the wood and stone, but what it meant. The weight of glory, he knows now, is not something to bear forever. It must be released like a bird into twilight. He takes one last look at the city's distant lights, faint through the mist, and whispers, "May Rome stand, and may her heroes rest." The Tiber answers with its eternal murmur, the only applause he will ever need. The river glides on, carrying his silence as gently as it once carried his courage. Yet somewhere within that quiet flow, a question remains. Can any man truly lay down the weight of his own glory? Time, that patient sculptor, smooths even the hardest stones. Yet some stories remain sharp, etched into the grain of nations, immune to erosion. Horatius, who once stood alone before an army, lived on in the breath of Rome itself. Long after his body returned to dust, his defiance shimmered in every dawn that rose above the Tiber. The river, restless yet faithful, carried his name like a secret song, whispering it to the reeds, to the walls, to the hearts of those who still believed in the strength of one soul against many. Rome, no longer ruled by kings, learned to speak a new language, that of the Republic. It was a tongue of compromise and argument, of men debating what no monarch could decide alone. In the Senate, they spoke of laws, of liberty, of limits to power, but when words faltered, they remembered Horatius. His story was not written on scrolls first, but on hearts. It became a measure by which they tested every boast and every promise. Would you stand if all others fled? The tale seemed to ask. The Republic grew from that question. Mothers told their children, as twilight settled, of the man who had faced 1,000 and stood unbroken. They did not speak of victory alone, for his victory had not been in conquest, but in conviction. The tale was simple enough for a child to grasp, yet deep enough for statesmen to ponder. It reminded Rome that courage was not born in comfort, but in the certainty of what must be protected. As generations passed, the bridge itself became a relic of memory. Stones were replaced, repaired, and sometimes lost to the river's moods. Yet the spot where Horatius had stood became sacred ground, not by temple or decree, but by quiet reverence. The people would pause as they crossed, looking toward the water, as though they might still glimpse a shadow rising against the dawn, shield gleaming, eyes steady. In marble halls, artists carved his likeness, though none truly knew his face. They sculpted the idea of him. A man defined by resolve, not by form. In their works, he became larger than any soldier, more myth than man. The poets followed, gilding the edges of truth with song. Yet beneath the ornament of verse, the essence remained one man, one stand, one moment that outlasted empires. For empires would come. Rome, ever hungry, stretched its limbs across the world. It conquered, absorbed, and rebuilt until the city of 7 hills ruled from ocean to desert. Legions marched under eagles, and every standard carried within it the ghost of Horatius. They might not have spoken his name on the field, but they knew what it meant to hold a line, to guard a bridge, to believe that retreat was not an option. Still, as victories multiplied, Rome forgot how fragile glory can be. The Republic that had honored his simplicity began to crave spectacle. Triumphs filled the streets, generals returned to crowds roaring not for sacrifice, but for splendor. Marble replaced memory. Statues multiplied, and truth was buried beneath applause. Yet every now and then, when a commander stood too proud or a senator too corrupt, an old voice rose in the forum, quiet, almost wary, to remind them of Horatius. His name became both mirror and warning. For he had fought not for wealth, nor for vanity, but for the soul of a city that might have perished had he faltered. The Tiber, eternal observer, kept its vigil. By moonlight it murmured against its banks, carrying leaves, secrets and echoes downstream. Sometimes, when the fog hung low and torches flickered on the bridges, an old ferryman would pause and listen. He would swear that he could hear a heartbeat in the water, steady, patient, unafraid. Perhaps he imagined it. Perhaps Rome itself remembered. In the years when the Republic faltered, when brothers drew swords against brothers and liberty began to splinter beneath ambition, the story of Horatius softened into something like prayer. Teachers recited it to students as reminder, not boast. That courage without humility is only half a virtue. The bridge he guarded became a symbol of what joined people, not what divided them. And when the Republic finally fell, when Caesar's shadow darkened the forum and the Senate's voice grew quiet, still the story endured. It belonged to no ruler, no family, no army. It lived in the space between legend and conscience, where every nation keeps its truest stories. The centuries moved on. Empires rose from Rome's ashes, borrowing her tongue, her laws, her architecture, and her myths. In distant lands, Horatius became a figure of teaching, his stand a metaphor for duty beyond the self. Poets of other ages, from other islands and languages, revived his name, finding in his courage a universal rhythm. For though the Tiber no longer ran through their veins, they too knew what it meant to face the flood and say, "Not today." Even now, as the ruins of Rome sleep beneath the stars, one might stand upon the bridge and feel the hush of something remembered. The air hums with invisible reverence, not for conquest, but for defiance that asks nothing in return. The stones beneath one's feet are warm with centuries of footsteps, and the river glimmers as though it still carries the reflection of a man who refused to move. History forgets so much: names, dates, empires, kings, but sometimes it keeps what matters most. A story that teaches, softly, how to be human in the face of fear. The Republic is gone, the emperors are dust, but the tale of Horatius remains. It is the pulse beneath the marble, the whisper beneath the anthem, the breath between two ages of men. And as night settles over the Tiber once more, Rome dreams, not of empire, but of one man standing on a bridge, holding the world together for a single, timeless moment. The river still flows, unending, toward the sea, carrying with it the memory of courage that outlived crowns. And so the story settles like soft mist over the Tiber at dawn. Every age, it seems, carries its own floods, challenges that rise quietly or sweep in with the roar of storms. Yet tonight, we have walked with one soul who stood firm against the tide, who held a bridge not with force, but with stillness. Horatius reminds us that courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is a heartbeat held steady, a hand unclenched, a moment of quiet defiance that ripples farther than we ever know. Those centuries have passed. His echo hums softly in the hush, whispering that even a single stand can shape the world. Thank you, dear listener, for sharing this quiet space with me tonight, for allowing the hush of history to fold around your thoughts, for trusting that we could wander together, gently, through river and memory, You are not merely hearing this story. You are part of it, carrying its reflection into your own night, your own mind, your own heart. Every pause, every breath you take with me becomes a quiet conversation across time, a bridge between past and present. Now, let the day slip away like leaves carried by a slow current. Unlace your shoulders. Let your hands rest. Breathe with the rhythm of the river, patient and endless, and let its stillness carry you. May your dreams float lightly, cradled by the courage of those who came before, warmed by the knowledge that quiet deeds leave the deepest traces. Sleep well beneath the hush of history's lullaby, knowing that even in silence, something beautiful endures. This has been the Sleeping Hourglass, a place where the past tucks you in, where stories drift like candlelight across the river of time. If this brought you a moment of calm, you are always welcome to return, to wander again through the folds of memory, through the echoes of courage, and the gentle lessons of ages long past. And now, as the Tiber flows beneath starlight, may your own bridge be found and held quietly